In. Okay, here's our recipe for making soft pretzels. This is going to be a more than 1 day version. We also have a recipe for a 1 day version, similar to the 1 day version of yeast rolls that some of you guys made in Baking and Pastry 1. So this is going to be the more than 1 day version in class. You could absolutely make these in 1 day at home. Okay, so this one, we're going to activate our yeast. Remember on our croissants, we used the straight mix method where we just dumped everything in. The pretzels call for yeast activation first, so we can remember that we use sugar to feed yeast. So this liquid measuring cup has yeast, sugar, and 12 ounces of warm water. When we're activating yeast, we want to make sure that we feed it and that we give it warm water. We're going to give it those fat tom conditions. So we fed it sugar, low acidity, time. It takes a little time for it to get frothy. We're going to give it the right temperature, so we're going to be about 100 degrees-ish. We're going to give it some oxygen and then moisture in the form of water. We're going to let that stand until it's really frothy. So it's got this frothy on top and we're good to go. Sometimes it's less than 10 minutes, but sometimes about 10 minutes. Okay, this is my dry ingredients. I'm going to start with 3 cups of flour and I might use up to 5 cups of flour, but this is going to start with 3. So I've got my 3 cups of flour. You could use brown sugar or white sugar if you didn't have brown sugar at home. They work well with white sugar too. They're just a little softer with brown sugar, which is what I prefer. And my salt. Remember, my salt conditions my gluten, and it's going to bring out flavors too, but it helps condition my gluten and control the growth rate of my yeast. So I'm going to make a well in the center, and then I'm going to dump my yeast mixture and oil. I'm going to mix it to form a dough. And then I'm going to add flour as needed to get the dough to pull away from the sides of the bowl. You could also do this in the food processor if you were doing that at home. So I'm just going to mix it, and then it forms a dough. I'm going to flour my countertop and dump my dough out on the countertop. So it's still pretty shaggy, and that's okay. And it's going to just go on my floured surface. I'm going to knead this one longer than my croissants. It's going to take 7 to 8 minutes. Remember, don't over knead. It's better to under knead than over knead. So I'm looking for it to not be sticky, of course. And then here is my dough. She looks excited over there. Here is my dough. That shows that my gluten is going to be strong. So it's staying like this. If I did this in the beginning and I hold it up, it's just going to fall over into a little pile. So the gluten is strong there. So it's going to go into my 4-quart storage container that's been sprayed with cooking spray. I'm going to form that orb like we did for our yeast rolls. I'm going to put the pretty side down first, and then I'm going to turn it over and put the pretty side up. So at this point, it's got oil on both sides, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on. Once I have the lid on, I'm going to take my dry erase marker and I'm going to label it with your group number and what it is. And then if you don't want me to pull this out of the fridge the next day, then you need to label what day this needs to get pulled out of the fridge. And then we're going to let it rise. So this one was about that much dough to start with. And we're at 2 quarts there, so it rose pretty significantly. And I want it to rise some before I ever put it in the fridge. If you put it straight in the fridge, of course it's going to retard the process of fermentation, but it's also going to make it so it just doesn't rise as well when it comes out. So instead we get some of that pre-rise going, and then we're going to put it in the fridge. So once you're finished with it, you put it back at your station, and then a teacher will put it in the fridge here in about an hour. Okay, then we'll put it in the fridge, just like this. And then I pulled it out of the fridge the next morning, in our case, and I divided it into 12. I just took the whole dough, divided it into half, divided those into half, and then cut each of those into 3. You could weigh it to be more accurate. So here are my dough chunks. And then I want a little bit of flour on my countertop, but it's hard to roll dough that's really floured. It's a lot easier to roll it if it's just a tiny bit sticky, so you don't want it to be completely covered in flour. I parchment lined some baking sheets, and I'm preheating my oven to 450. Then I rolled these into ropes. If they're springing back a ton, just let them sit for a while. The gluten needs to relax. So some of these you can see have sprung back, and then some of them aren't. So I am rolling them out. And when I roll them out, I kind of put my hand on top right here. I put my palm right here. And I kind of have one end as my anchor. And then I roll this end out. And then I flip it. And I put this as my other end. And put my palm down on the end. And then just roll out from there. That's the best way for me that I found to make it work. And then I'm going to take that rope. And I'm going to form a circle out of it. And then I'm going to twist the tops of it. And then I'm just going to pull that twist towards me. And I have a pretzel. These are going to go on parchment lined baking sheets. If your pretzels are pretty sticky, then you need to either spray or lightly flour your parchment before you put them on there. Don't put them straight on there or they will stick. Here are my pretzels that are shaped and on parchment. So the unfortunate part is that I had to let mine proof for a little too long because I was teaching another class, so mine kind of overproofed and then they really stuck to the parchment. So don't let them overproof. If you need to at this point, you're going to cover them with plastic wrap and put them back in the refrigerator to retard that process again. So you're going to let them proof just a little bit if they need to. It kind of depends on how puffy they already feel, because if they overproof, they kind of collapse when you stick them into that water. So okay, so here we go with our water. So I shaped them, proofed them, or overproofed them, and cooked them on the same day. So our water is water, of course, and an entire half a cup of baking soda. I'm going to put this in a stock pot and bring it to a boil. This process here kind of sets the outside. It gives it that characteristic flavor of a soft pretzel, and it also helps it be really nice and glossy on the outside. So we'll do that. I'll take my pretzels. You can tell they're a little overproof just by how pillowy they are. They're very pretty if I were sticking them straight in the oven, but since I have to stick them in the water still, they're a little overproofed. So this is post-boiling for about 20 seconds a piece. I put them back on the sheet pan and I sprinkle kosher salt on them. I baked them in that hot oven. It's a 450 degree oven, so it's pretty hot, and it's baked for about 7 to 7.5 minutes actually for me, sometimes 8. And then this is my final product, and they're delicious, dipped in mustard or cheese, or you could have done cinnamon and sugar. If you want to do cinnamon and sugar, don't salt them, and then when you pull them out, dip them in butter and roll them in cinnamon and sugar. I've had groups do pizza pretzels before, so before they put them in the oven, they did pepperonis and mozzarella on them, so kind of filled in the cracks and on the top with pepperonis and mozzarella, and then dip them in marinara. Or, of course, you can make pretzel buns, and you could just fill in those holes. So you can see that mine got a little bit misshapen because of my overproofing problem, but that is your final product, a delicious soft pretzel. And they also happen to be good frozen, so you bake them, you cool them, wrap them nicely, and then freeze them. And then my favorite way would be to reheat them in the oven because I like the crispness that the oven gives them, but you can absolutely reheat them in the microwave or just let them come to room temperature, however you like them. But they do well in the freezer. That is the end.